Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network and iHeartRadio. It doesn't always happen all at once. Sometimes the distance builds before anyone knows what they're seeing. A text that doesn't get answered. A routine that starts to change. Someone who doesn't show up when they usually do. But not enough to make a call. Not loud enough to feel like an emergency. So nothing happens. No check-in, no follow-up. And time moves on. Until one day, there is no response at all. And by the time things start to come into focus, the moment to see it for what it was has already passed. And sometimes it's not just missed. It's never fully seen. This is the Bystander Effect, Part 3. Welcome to Hunting for Answers. I'm your host, Hunter. We've talked about what happens in moments of crisis, how what we see and what we think we're seeing can shape whether anyone steps in at all. But what if there is no clear moment to react to at all? Sometimes nothing stands out enough to stop you until later. And by then, the timeline has already shifted. This part of the series focuses on that space. The moments before someone goes missing. When the signs blend in. When they're easy to explain away. And sometimes, by the time they're recognized, the chance to respond in real time has already passed. Joining me again is forensic psychologist Dr. Debra Warner. In missing and murdered cases, harm doesn't always happen in one clear moment. Sometimes it builds over time. So how does that change the way the bystander effect plays out?
So a lot of times, and people don't realize the subtle changes that happen with people, right? And they don't realize that something is happening to them, and it's a buildup over time. And a lot of times when people's routines change or things about them change, you don't notice and you think it's not that big of a deal, or it's none of my business, or this person's doing something different.
Sometimes there is no single moment you can point to. No clear line where everything changed. Just small shifts that don't feel urgent at the time.
It's always better to ask than not to ask. Because what is wrong with leaving someone a note on their desk? Or what is wrong with saying to someone, hey, I noticed, that you were late today and you've been late a couple of times. That's not like you. Is there something I can help you with? All they can do is say no.
And in that space between noticing and acting, this is where the bystander effect starts to set in. In many of these cases, there's a moment that comes later. A realization that doesn't happen in the moment. I should have noticed.
But if you don't notice that someone has stopped eating and lost a lot of weight, or you don't notice that someone's been incredibly anxious, or you notice that someone's been wearing the same clothes every day, right? Those are all small little things that something's going on in that person's life.
At the time, they don't feel like warning signs. They feel like things you can explain. Things you don't want to get wrong. Things you tell yourself you'll come back to. Until one day, there's no one to come back to. So in those moments, what happens next? This is where that thinking starts to show up.
It's not my business, or it's not that important, right? Or I don't want to be involved, or they may get mad at me. That's a common one. They may get mad at me for saying something.
These are the kinds of thoughts that come up as it's happening. And in that moment, they can create a gap between what's noticed and what's done. By the time someone realizes something is wrong, time has already moved. Those early hours are often considered the most important, when information is freshest and leads are still within reach. But the bystander effect can delay that response.
And so when you have the bystander effect happening and no one says anything and they think someone else did, right? That clock is ticking.
Time doesn't stop. What could have been a quick response can turn into a much longer search. How does normalcy make real danger easier to miss?
So if you live in a chaotic environment, your normal's not my normal, right? So it could be, if you live in a place that's not chaotic and you realize, hey, this looks out of place, you're going to be more alarmed to it than if I live in a different environment.
What looks out of place to one person might not register for someone else.
When you're in a situation of things changing in your life, right, and it may be traumatic, you eventually get used to it.
For some people, exposure to violence and disappearances isn't rare. It happens again and again. Research has shown that repeated exposure to violence can change how people respond to it.
They don't respond initially like they probably should because they're numb.
Not because people don't care, but because they've seen too much. They're still trying to live inside of it. And how people respond is only part of it. Because what happens next isn't just about what people see. It's about what gets seen at all. Research has shown that cases involving white women and girls often receive more media coverage than cases involving Black women and girls. Studies have found that this gap in coverage has been consistent over time. And that difference can shape what people know and what they don't.
I was looking at the John Benet Ramsey case, right? And at that time, there were 3 other cases of Black girls that went missing, right? But nobody knows who they are.
One case that still stands out is Asha Degree, a 9-year-old girl who disappeared after she was last seen outside her home in North Carolina in the early hours of February 14th, 2000. Her case drew attention, but over time, that attention faded. More than 2 decades later, she is still missing.
So people just figured it's solved. Oh, there's nothing more for me to say. It's solved, or they forgot about it, or they thought someone else probably reported things on it, right? And now here we are talking about it, and it's not solved.
In the years that followed, other families would speak out about that difference, like the family of Latoya Figueroa, a 24-year-old woman who went missing in Philadelphia in 2005. Her case received very little national attention at first. People close to her said at the time While the disappearance of Natalie Holloway was receiving extensive national coverage, her family was left trying to draw attention to her case on their own. And cases like that helped reveal a larger pattern. At the same time, some high-profile cases, like the case of JonBenet Ramsey, received national attention. Some families of missing Black girls and women have described their cases as harder to find. That difference doesn't just happen by accident. Over time, people have started to notice it. And at some point, it was given a name. It describes a pattern in which cases involving white women and girls receive more media attention. It's often referred to as missing white woman syndrome. Not just who gets covered, but how much, how often, and for how long. And over time, that coverage can shape which cases stay in the public conversation and which ones fade from it. But before any story makes the news, there are moments that don't stand out right away. Intervening doesn't always mean putting yourself in danger. Sometimes it looks like something simple.
What is wrong with leaving someone a note on their desk? Or what is wrong with saying to someone, hey, I noticed, that you were late today and you've been late a couple of times. That's not like you. Is there something I can help you with?
Because in that moment, saying something might be the difference between something being missed and someone being found. The bystander effect can look like silence, but it doesn't always have to stay that way.
Say something. Just saying something in a moment, saying, hey, do you see that? Will break all of that. People will begin to snap out of it and move.
And sometimes that one question is enough to shift what happens next and change how that moment ends. At times, the most important moments don't look like emergencies. They look like something you could ignore, something that doesn't feel like your place, until one day someone is missing. And the questions start to sound different. When was the last time you saw them? What did you notice? The moment you almost ignore might be the moment that matters most. If this episode made you think differently, follow Hunting for Answers. You can also connect with us through our Facebook group and find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If there's a story you believe deserves attention, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Until next time. Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network. For more podcasts from the Black Effect Podcast Network, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.